No, you're good now.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So you said that you could formalize an argument along the leftmost arm of the dialogue tree, right?
Along the rightmost arm, because it would probably be easy to formalize. I can say, because you see how it says, do you know which traits?
I'm not.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm asking rightmost arm. I'm sorry. I said because when I was hearing you talk to Gamos, I heard him at one point say that you could formalize these answers to give a formal argument that a person has contradicted themselves, and you agreed with that, and I agree with that too, right? Like if I just say, if I just take the proposition embedded in the first question, and I just say yes, comma, the proposition embedded in the first question, and then I take the second, the second answer, the second and third answer, and I do the same thing. I take that answer and then comma the propositions embedded in the questions, right? I think that what you would be doing there is you could give an argument. Well, on the one hand, you're giving an argument that that the person has contradicted themselves, and you agreed with that, right? Like that was the.
Yeah, because look, if someone says the trait is X and they say the trait is not X, I agree that you could formalize an argument to show a contradiction, and that's probably the most trivial contradiction I could ever imagine.
Right, but then Gamos said, that if you continue down that line, you could form an argument that would conclude as you've been reduced to absurdity. You accept.
That's through a different path. That the path branches a different way than that.
No, I was saying, but he was saying that you could formulate the answers and have that as a conclusion, right? I mean,
the conclusion being, then I didn't misunderstood Seamus. If Seamus what I heard Seamus saying is that there's an argument implicit in the dialogue tree because you could formalize something that shows that there's a contradiction. Because it says the trait is X, the trait is not X, therefore you've contradicted yourself on the rightmost side. And I'm like, okay, fine, sure, I'll agree with that because that's just something so trivial.
Well, maybe I misunderstood what he's saying, so maybe he can clarify. Gamos, are you saying that if you follow the leftmost path that you can follow in this tree, that you can create an argument out of those premises that conclude with the little purple bubble?
On the left side, Seamus? I thought you were talking about the right one. Wait, just Seamus. Just to be clear, the conclusion would be you've been reduced to absurdity. You accept the reductio on trait X. Is that what you were trying to say? That the argument would be formalized to? Because what I thought you were saying was that based on when you go down the long chain and you go take the rightmost path, not the leftmost path, you form there's an argument you could formalize saying you've contradicted yourself by affirming or rejecting that the trait is X. Now that I agree that you can formalize an argument from with that conclusion. But are you saying it for the left-hand side?
Well, I scrolled, the chat has kind of scrolled the thing out of my view now, but
I can repost it if you want.
Yeah, you can repost it. I'll look at it in a second.
Yeah,
all I was saying is that
I'll repost it.
You can show the argument by the answers in the dialogue tree, and you can just formulate those as premises, and then the argument is there within the dialogue tree itself.
I agree that that's there for. I agree that you can formalize that for the right-hand most side of the bottom. So if you go all the way to the bottom, if you see the right-hand most side, that I agree. That's like the most trivial setup ever. And that seems what you were saying to me in the conversation. You can say, even what you said was an argument. You said you're affirming contradiction. You affirm X and not X. X and not X if you affirm X and not X is a contradiction. You affirmed X and not X. Therefore, you're affirming contradiction. Like that's clearly talking about the right hand side, not the left hand most side. Now, Josh is asking you, are you saying there's something formalizable on the left hand most side? Which I didn't take you to be saying. But if you think you were saying that, then provide clarity to Josh that that's actually what you were saying, or if that's not what you were saying, provide clarity to Josh that that's not what you were saying.
I think he's probably looking at it right now.
Look, to be clear, I was talking about the right side, but as I look at the left side,
was talking about the right side.
the left side, you could do the same thing with the left side as well.
Right. That's what I heard you say, and then that's what I heard Avi agree to, and so that's
I don't know if I only agree to the right side. Just for the record.
But the same thing is true of the left side as well.
Well, explain. Wait, when you follow the leftmost path, what argument do you think is being made there, Gamos?
Well, I think what's happening is saying, okay, so they say that there's a certain trait, and then you're saying something like, do you maintain that trait is X despite there being a reductio for it? Yes, ergo contradiction.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
So, is there a point where moral value is lost? The answer is yes, right? So that just means that if we pick random traits, and we just start assigning them to a human, maybe dehumanizing them or whatever, at some point while we're dehumanizing them, is it going to be acceptable to kill them? And then the answer there is supposed to be yes. Right? Are you following? That's what the first question is asking.
Yeah, I'm following.
Okay. So saying yes to that's not affirming a contradiction, right? We're following the leftmost dialogue, right? Okay,
Josh,
so
I think you're cutting out. Is Josh cutting out for anyone else or just me? It might just be me. Probably is just me. But Josh, I just wanted to be clear. I'm not seeing a formalizable argument on the left-handmost side. I only was seeing a formalizable argument on the right-handmost side.
Well, I want to figure out what Gamos thinks that the argument is.
Oh, okay.
So if we take the answer yes, there's a point at which, while we're dehumanizing this human, it's morally acceptable to kill them, right? Is that so? Let me just. Were you criticizing just the straightforward, the rightmost side, where you're just saying no? So on the first premise, you're saying, well, there's obviously a point because there's a point at which it's acceptable, and so you're saying it's acceptable to kill this non-human animal, and it's also not acceptable. So you're contradicting yourself. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's the one that me and Avi were talking about. And Avi we had agreed that was a contradiction. All I was saying is, and I was just bringing that up because it was stated earlier that there's this whole side here, everything that in this picture that you see here, none of which is. And I was just trying to show just through that there certainly is an argument. I wasn't talking about the left.
Okay, so you're saying the current moral view is supposed that there's a difference in moral value, and then the answer is no, that there's no, then that entails that there's no difference, and then you could conclude that that's a contradiction, right? But what do you think? What in your mind is the argument if we follow the leftmost this thing?
Oh, okay. So I already discussed this with Avi. I just think that if you follow the complete leftmost side, that the bottom part there, none of which of that is an argument, because what they mean by a reductio isn't like a classical logical reductio where you take it that A is true and show that A derives both B and not B. They said that what they mean by that is just to say, like, either something like, I think your view is crazy, or I don't agree with your view, or a lot of people would think your view is crazy, or a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, or something like that. And
maybe I misunderstood what you were saying there, because I thought you said that you could formalize an argument out of just following the leftmost branch. But I thought that's what you were saying. But it sounds like you're
No. I mean, I think Avi had me correct. Avi, you didn't think I was.
No, I thought you were just saying that for the right-handmost side. and which
Okay.
Yeah.
I swear to God, you said this, and then obviously
you did say that. Yeah.
Oh, maybe I had my wires crossed, but just to be clear, no, I definitely don't think a formalizable argument from the left-hand side is there. I do think a formalizable argument from the right-hand side is there. That's very trivially true.
No, wasn't I clear, Avi, that the left-hand side was just you saying neener, neener, boo-boo, I don't like you, people don't like you?
I thought, yeah, I mean, I thought, yeah. So again, I'm just...
I was
all right.
Couldn't have been more clear.
So if that's it, like, again, this is just the iterative process that's being done. This is the deductive parts, both in the deductive tree and in the right-handmost side, are just arguments that would show trivial contradictions. Although you'd be surprised as to how many people actually engage in this and fall into those trivial contradictions, which is why it may be somewhat useful. Another use for it is
I just really doubt that though. Like you don't. I mean, they're not.
But it's true though.
No, look, no one. If you ask them straightforwardly, do you think this chicken has moral value, and at the same time it doesn't have moral value? They're going to say no. That's what the argument.
People that do say yes, Josh.
Right. That's why I said it was misleading the way that it's posited. If you just ask them straightforwardly, does John not have the properties that John has? Of course, they're going to say no.
But you'd be surprised. No, I understand that. But then you'd be surprised at how they say, like, okay, these are the things that are, necessary and sufficient for separating value from non-value. And then when you ask them again in another context, they would change their mind and they would say no, without realizing what they're actually saying is this John doesn't and does not have the moral properties. It's like, it's trivially true when you put it that way, but you'd be surprised when you actually have to really spell it out to them in this other context for them to appreciate how in the other context that trivially true thing is actually what they're affirming. But that's not
what the first question asks though, right? Because the first question just asks, basically, are you contradicting yourself? Right.
Oh yeah, I mean, look. I mean, the first question doesn't. Yeah, I mean, the first question.
What you just proffered was an argument, right? You say if these are the necessary and sufficient conditions. Well, we don't even need to talk about the necessary conditions, right? They're obviously there if the sufficient conditions are there. So we just talk about the sufficient conditions. So if you say if these are the sufficient conditions, and then you're saying X has the sufficient conditions for slaughter, but then you're also saying X doesn't have the sufficient conditions for slaughter, then either, you have to go back to the drawing board, say that these aren't sufficient conditions, or, come down on the arm that says that you can, if a human meets these conditions, then they're also sufficient, because the notion of sufficiency is baked into them, right?
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, you'd be surprised at how many people, I know it's the case because I've seen so many people like affirm this, like, trivially true contradiction. But the other
think that they actually think that though, right? Yeah, like no one. Okay, no one thinks. I mean, you might get people to say all sorts of stuff, but you don't think that any of them actually think that, right?
Some of them have really bitten the bullet down on them, and then when they're asked about dialetheism, they actually do. But yeah, no, it teases out. The other value that I get from it is there's something about running them through that dialogue that does get people to reflect on their values. I definitely know it happened with me. Like this Socratic method has veganized me. So I know that it definitely was the case for me. And it successfully veganizes not just idiots, but people who are well educated through being able to reflect their values. And if I was told, even if it's the same thing, if I, for some reason or whatever, if I was expressively told, like, hey, do you think these properties are and are not the sufficient conditions for moral value? I don't think it would have been as successful as veganizing me. And same thing for a lot of other people. So that would be useful. That's like just some useful thing that the argument does.
Well, I remember when I first saw this video, this is the one that was put out with, it has the same image here, but it was put out on like June 5th, 2019. Ask yourself, I was at first, when he first was talking about like equalizing all the traits, I kind of was thinking like you just take, not all of the traits, but like you take the relevant ones that might be what people would say would be the types like intelligence and these type of things, but you don't take every property. And so I was thinking, you know, if you just took like a certain set of properties like intelligence or, you know, is sentient, or just like the common ones like that people might appeal to, would people then like say that, you know, it still doesn't have moral value or something like that? But then I realized that, because he goes down and he shows an example where they have like traits A, B, C, D, E. And then he talks about how you would just ascribe to them all the same traits so that they would have the same thing. And then I realized what he's saying is if they were actually the same thing. And then I was just like, okay, like, you know, so he's just saying something that's just literally completely trivial. And I think people might get caught in between that and not understand what's going on. But I think Josh is correct. I mean, this is what I said earlier. If you just outright ask them, you know, instead of like, you know, doing something that might be fairly misleading.
Yeah, but hold on. But what I'm doing here, I don't see what I'm doing. The way I've outlined it is misleading. Because if you ask someone, they would probably say no, but that doesn't get to the heart of the issue. The question, you can ask the question like, okay, what is specifically true of one that not, if true of the other, would lead to a valuation difference? Sure, you can ask that and you can explore that. That's fine. I don't see the way I framed it as being any more misleading than that, or less misleading than that.
Well, look, I
mean, it seems like they're equivalently entailed, right? I mean, it seems like I don't see anything that would generate different answers. I'm not saying
what I'm saying is I don't think there's anything wrong with once is understood what's saying. But when I'm just responding to you saying, well, people have, you know, gotten to this point and actually contradicted themselves. And I told you the reason I think that's why is because they've just been misled by that whole process. And if it was stated a bit more clearly or just outright, they probably would obviously just deny it.
I think maybe some people may be confused, but I do definitely know that there are some people who have, in order to maintain the view, actually like sort of looked into dialectism. But regardless, I don't think. Look, the way so like I'm not saying an issue. Like the way I have phrased this, I think I've phrased it in a very clear way. I don't think there's anything not clear about the way I put it. You certainly understood it. I think everyone smart in the room, I think they've understood it, or I think maybe even people who are not so smart in the room have understood it. There's nothing deceptive about it. So I'm just not seeing the criticism. Like,
So the way you phrased it is you're just saying, you're just asking a person, do you think that there's some sufficient conditions such that a human is impermissible to kill, but an animal is permissible to kill? That would
be an equivalent. Like, but what have you heard what I said about with the possible worlds? It's just like where in the series of possible worlds between these two would value be lost? And yes, I can clarify and say, okay, that's basically just the same thing as saying, you know, between this human and between this animal, you know, you say the human is not permissible to kill, you say the animal is permissible to kill. You know, what's different between these two cases such that if changed, or not even if changed, what's just the difference between these two cases such that one carries value and one does not carry value? Yeah, I mean, I don't see what's the problem with this. Like, I'm not seeing the issue.
No, I mean, there's no issue with you asking that question.
Yeah.
And so the idea there is that it is kind of different. It's not like a yes/no dialogue at that point, right? That's like if a person could give like a million different answers to what's the property, you know, ever that you're talking about, right?
Well, the dialogue starts. I mean, it starts because some people may say, like, okay, like if on your view of traits are true given human or switch them out given others, is there any point in trait valuation is lost? Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is because I'm assuming that that question has already been answered. So I'm starting later in the dialogue tree I'm assuming that someone would give different answers for the human and the animal, because someone could just say no, they're the same. The way I phrase the question, I'm starting later in the dialogue tree. If that's fine. But yes, I can ask like, okay, is there a difference? I can ask the first question.
So okay, so you're saying, let's say they say the difference is some property X, right?
Yeah.
And then when you say, is there any point in the trait equalization process? The question there is there some point where humans have X but animals don't have X?
Well,
that's the second question.
Well, no, the first that if once they say, well, no, the first question is, at least in this dialogue tree, the first question is, if all traits are true of a given human who has moral value are switched to match those of a given non-human animal who doesn't have moral value, and I clarified with the possible worlds thing there, is there any point in these trait equalization process, again, like going through the possible worlds, where moral value is lost? Now, a person has two answers to that. They can say yes or no.
Well,
if they say,
I want to clarify this question, so I want to reformulate it in my terms.
Yeah, sure.
It's more easy to digest, right? So when that second question there is just asking, if I start removing properties, will I have eventually removed the X property? That?
Well, they haven't at that point said that the trait is X. So just the first question before they've said anything. Like, I'll give it to you in my words. Like,
this is why I understand, because I thought you said that before we get to this dialogue tree, they've already answered the question about the property.
No, I've said no. The dialogue tree. No. In the dialogue tree that I've linked. Do you have?
Yeah, on your current moral view, if all traits are true of a given human who has moral value, are those true of a given non-human animal who doesn't have moral value? Is there any point in the trait equalization process where moral value is lost? That's what I'm at. That sounds to me like you're just asking, if I just start removing traits from the human, will I eventually remove trait X? Which is,
yeah. Well, it could be. Well. Wait a minute. I don't know if that is the same as that.
Well, that's the trait that's true. Well, because we were assuming that they've already got a trait in mind, right? And that's the trait that's true of the animal.
No, we're not. We're not assuming they already have a trait in mind, because if you look down the dialogue tree, they can say no to that and say that they could say there is no trait. And then you would just show the trivial contradiction. But if we're assuming that someone's not going to get themselves into any trivial contradictions, then yes, I would make that assumption. Well, but this dialogue tree doesn't. Dialogue tree doesn't make that.
Well, hold on. But I'm saying that. Sorry, this is why it's very confusing, right? Because if you say on the one hand that, like, you could still get someone to contradict themselves, right? Because they could have already said that, X is the relevant trait for moral sufficiency in whatever way we're considering,
and then say it's not.
Yeah, they can still contradict themselves.
Yeah, but that's the second contradiction in the dialogue tree. So the first contradiction doesn't even assume they have the X. So the first contradiction in the dialogue pathway is if they answer no to that question. Then you actually deliver the deductive tree, which I can link again if you don't have it up on your screen. So that would be the first.
I would have trouble viewing that because I'm on my phone anyway. So having one up is enough.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, before we even make the assumption that someone has an X, we can just say, if they answer no to the question, so if you go back to basically as simple as going back to the original and giving a different answer for moral value, then we would say, and they would say no, because moral value.
Wait, he cut out for me. Did he cut out for anybody else?
Yeah, he did.
Wait, is he coming back? Gamos, are you there? What happened? Am I disconnected?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Is Gamo still in chat? I'm not looking at Discord. I'm looking at this fucking thing. Oh, it looks like he's connected.
His mic is muted. I don't know what he's doing.
I cut out, guys. Sorry. I don't know. Where were we, Josh?
Okay, so the first question is just to ask, I guess, in this dialogue tree, is just to ask, it's like, it's hard to reformulate this in like a not.
Let me ask it to you. I'll put it into my words. I'll say, okay, let's say you have so if you have a human who presumably has moral value, and you have an animal that presumably does not have a moral value, and you have a series of possible worlds between them, is there any, and we include in this series of possible worlds, like the animal itself and the human itself, like the originals themselves, is there any point, and we start from the human and work our way back to the animal through these series, is there any point at which moral value is lost? Right, and so if they answer no to that, basically what that entails is that they've actually gotten back to the original, which is the animal, and moral value is not lost, and that would contradict their original position, which is the animal which doesn't have moral value. So we would just say that's just a trivial contradiction. So the trivial contradiction is if they say no. If they say there's no point at which moral value is lost in that transition process, in that going through the possible worlds. Assuming in that question we include.
I guess I don't understand why you're uncomfortable with my phraseology when I say, are you just saying that if you just kept dehumanizing a person and giving them chicken properties or whatever, right? Is there some point at which they become permissible to eat? You're not, like, why?
The reason I'm not comfortable about that is because that may entail some sort of metaphysical, have some sort of metaphysical entailments implicit in the question. So basically, like saying that, saying that a human. So there's a couple of issues with that. So the first issue I have is that even just someone can appeal to things like the history of the object, like the history is what they value, and so they can say no without contradicting themselves. So if I say I have a human and I'm changing the human to give them chicken properties, is there any point where value is lost? Now, they can say, no, there is no point at which the value is lost in that procedure, because that chicken, that thing that is now a chicken, still had the history there that was human. And so they can actually say no without contradicting themselves. Whereas in the possible worlds, they really wouldn't, because that possible world would just include all the possible predicates. The second... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So I guess I'm just confused about what the question means on the possible worlds view then, right? Like, is it just, you're saying you take some predicate of the human that the chicken doesn't have, right?
Okay.
And then, I guess, and that includes the history, right? So we...
Yeah.
So, but see, I don't understand why wouldn't that be captured in the properties thing, right? Like, I'm just saying you.
Oh, I see.
Why couldn't?
Yeah, if you want to say, well, I'm changing the history too. Sure. The issue I would have is that, some people have tried to say, okay, though there's some kind of weird, some people have levied an argument to say that there's some kind of weird entailment, that what we're saying is now, are you saying that, like, there's a human non-human, there's some sort of a human non-human entailment? Like, there are certain people that when it's framed that way, they've tried to make that argument. I'm not sure I really agree with that argument, but I like my framing better because that argument can't even be framed against the possible world's framing.
Well, I guess the reason I don't understand the possible worlds thing is because, I mean, it just sounds like it really does just sound like you're asking them, does a thing both have moral value and not have moral value, right? Like, if it's just,
Yeah, I mean, if someone really is, to more intelligent people, I agree that probably would sound like that, and it would be an easy question to answer. No, although you'd be surprised as to, it really. I agree that it's a trivial. Look, listen, I agree it's trivial. I agree that anyone who's really smart and well versed in philosophy would say, yeah, this is, of course, the answer is no, because it's just if they had all the same properties, they have all the same properties. Although you would be surprised just how many people have tried to push back in some sort of motivated way to say, like, no, you really can say no and it's not a contradiction. Like, it's amazing.
I feel
yeah, go ahead.
But I feel like this is evidence for Gamos's point is that it's misleading, Like you saying that
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, but I don't actually think the way I framed it was misleading, though. Like, I don't think that it was coming out of. I don't think that the people giving the answer no was coming out of a misleading point, because I did take the time to really clarify to them. I think it was coming out of a motivated reasoning type of point where they were just, and some have admitted after they've saying, okay, look, I was engaging, I was just like being a bad faith actor or whatnot, or like I changed my view. That they want to just push back on something because they disagree with it. But yeah.
Well, let me explain why I think it's misleading. Okay,
go for it.
I think even that.
And by the way, maybe Isaac is willing to talk to you. I know he's not willing to talk to Seamus, but this is Isaac's argument. Really, you should be talking to him if you think his argument is misleading.
I'm gonna mute the moron so I don't have to hear anything from him. What's up, Josh?
I guess I just don't understand how. I don't really understand the whole framing of the question in terms of possible worlds or whatever, right? Because it does really just seem like the first question in the dialogue tree is just asking R equals, right? And if the answer to that is no, then it's like a person's contradicting himself because they're saying something is equal and it's not equal, right? But it really does seem like the first question boils down to that, but you wouldn't just ask that question. That question is R equals. Like it's somehow different from just that question. And so that's why I think it's misleading, because let's say it does, for the sake of argument, amount to that. I mean, I don't know if you think it does, but let's say for the sake of argument that it amounts to that. And you ask the question about possible worlds. And this is just empirical, right? But then you ask the same person, R equals. The answer there is just going to be trivially yes, right? That's not a misleading question, but most people are just going to say yes, equals are equals. Two things. Well, if it makes sense to call them two different things or whatever, if they're equal, then they're equal, right? If I have two on one hand and two on the other hand of the equation, those are equal. It's not that one is equal to two and the other is not equal to two. They're not going to say that, right? But I'm not so sure that everybody who is confronted with the thing about possible worlds is going to answer the same way. They're not just going to say, oh yeah, obviously yes, right? So if that's supposed to be what Gamos is saying he's saying it's misleading and you're just asking some trivial question like R equals, then yeah, I think I agree with him, which is just that, most people are not going to answer that way. They're not just going to say, yeah, equals are equals. They're not going to say, most people are not going to say no. And I think that was the other part of his criticism too, which is that this has nothing to do with veganism, because you could do the same thing you could ask the same question of, cars, right? Like you could say, you have a Ferrari and a Ford, and you just start saying, well, you changed everything about the Ferrari until it was a Ford. Would it still be a Ferrari and not a Ford, Like that. That's why. So there were a few criticisms, I guess, of that dialogue tree, which is one is that the question does seem misleading because it's not asking what it seems like the true intention is, which is just R equals, and then most people would just answer no. Sorry,
so
most people.
I guess.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
No, I just misspoke. I mean, most people are going to answer yes, equals R equals.
So just to be clear, I kind of want to ask you the thing that I asked Seamus at the start. Are you actually saying that something is false right now, or are you just kind of like asking questions?
Well, it's false what Avi said, that this is not misleading, at least to me.
Okay, well, wait. Just what I don't know everything Avi said, but are you saying that there's anything false contained in the dialogue flow or deduction tree?
Well, the dialogue flow is, yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff false in there, but if we're just talking about you've been reduced to absurdity. That's the first false thing. On the hand where they say no, you've been reduced to absurdity. That's false.
Where are we talking about? Are we talking about the very first one?
Yeah, you're uncertain of the moral state of all beings in question. First of all, that one doesn't. That one's just.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Josh. I didn't hear you. Are you saying the first mention of absurdity or the second one?
The first one, but I think both are probably true.
Yeah. The idea there is just that if you have no idea where in the process value is lost, you have absolutely no idea at all, you'd be taking a position that you're uncertain if a human with just one molecule altered has value. I take it that most.
But it doesn't establish it. But I mean, I don't think that that's right, though. I don't think that that's right. I said.
Well, sorry. What do you mean by what? Wait.
Well, you haven't. I mean, there's nothing illogical about believing that, right?
I didn't say there's anything.
Then we just get to the appeal to popularity thing about absurdity, right?
No, I didn't say that anything is true or false in virtue of how many.
Well, I mean, what makes something absurd? Just that people believe it, or nothing?
I just take it to be a matter of whether people's values align.
But wait. The proposition is it's absurd, right? And I said, what makes it absurd? And you said that people are going to believe it's absurd. So that couldn't.
Well, I would say minimally. I would say minimally myself and people who have values like me.
Yeah, but what makes it absurd?
And I would assume that's a lot of people. Here, I'm just talking about it's an implausibility, right? It's not when they look at it and they reflect on their own values. It's just like. Not so if someone ends up saying something like, for example, they end up in some reductio about saying it's fine to Holocaust the disabled. When we say that's absurd, we're not saying that there's like a contradiction entailed there or something. Like, obviously I wouldn't make a claim like that. When it's called absurd, it's just the idea is most people are going to look at that statement and it's going to be like radically out of line with their values. Minimally, I will. People have values like.
Right. So when it's.
Do you actually disagree with what I just.
I do disagree with what you said, but before we get to that, I just want that there needs to be clarity on this point. When you say absurd, you just mean that you.
Yeah, out of line with my values, the values of people like me, which I expect would.
Okay, but I mean, so I think that at least rhetorically, the argument loses a lot of force if you say that. So when you say you've been reduced to absurdity, you're saying, well, I don't like that, and a lot of people who are like me won't like that.
Yeah, you've just shown that they have some kind of, value that's just out of line with, anyone who's like me, which I would take to probably be.
Well, that's something else I disagree with.
That, for example, if someone makes a statement like that it's fine to Holocaust the disabled. Well, can I ask you one, though? You think if someone says something like that, that's not going to look absurd?
I can say that most people are going to grant that that's absurd, but what I'm saying is that I don't think the dialogue tree commits you to that.
Commits you to what specific?
I'm saying you could follow that exact path and you wouldn't end up with anything like what you're talking about.
Sorry, follow which exact
path that led us to you've been reduced to absurdity, you're uncertain of the moral status of all beings in between the trade equalization beginning and end points.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I take it that if someone says, I'm uncertain whether it's ethical to Holocaust a being that is one molecule away from a human, that would look just insane.
Straw man, what I'm saying.
I'm not straw manning what you're saying. If you say that you have absolutely no idea in the trade equalization process where value is lost, right? You just don't know where value is in there. Then I can pick any being in there. And according to that position, you're just not sure about its value, right? So you can take, for example, just a human with one moleculed alter. And by that position, you'd have to say, yeah, I'm not sure if it's right or wrong.
I'm not sure that follows, though, right?
Listen, you say, when you say, do you know which trait defines that point, right? I take that to be that there's like...
It's just asking, do you have any idea where the value drops in the trade equalization?
Well, then maybe it should be changed to that, right? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that phrasing is fine.
Okay, because I could say no to that. I could say yes to that. Doesn't commit me to the absurdity, right? And you could even say, if you say yes, I have an idea, and you say which traits, then you could say I don't know to that, and that doesn't put you on the other. Or like you just say, well, maybe this is relevant. In some cases, this is relevant. Maybe it might not be. I don't know. It's kind of uncertain. Like, if you just ran Sorites paradox and you just asked a person to like define a pile or something like that, right? It's not gonna be clear to everybody. There's this grain of sand, that's the cutoff point, or whatever, But they have some sort of...
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But that's a bit misleading right there, right? I don't think someone needs to give some exact finite position. We're just asking, just generally, right? Where does value drop?
But that's
off,
not
roughly. When do we reach like the kind of being that you look at and you go, yeah, I'm not sure if that has value.
Right, but it might not be stark to them except for on the extreme cases, right? Like you might be. There's a...
Well, wait, wait 1 second. So if it's not clear except at the edges, then you can pick any place in the middle, and we're not sure about it. That's like...
Yeah, but that's not that. Yeah, but that's not a problem. Like what's absurd about that, right? Like if I said...
Well, it would just look insane to people. To Josh, I mean, let me ask you this, right?
Hold on a sec.
Are you uncertain? Wait, no, I want to ask you something. I want to ask you something. Are you uncertain if, for example, a human with a cow tail has...
No.
Right. Exactly. And do you not think that it would look ridiculous to say that?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by ridiculous, right? I don't think...
I mean, it would be radically out of line with your values. To you, it would be obvious that being has value.
Yeah, to me, that's fine. Yeah, so... But ridiculous is just to say... I mean, people can value ridiculous things, in my estimation. That's not a problem. Right?
Yeah. There's not an attempt to show... I think that there's just some, like, fundamental confusion. There's not an attempt to show that they're making, like, a logical error, Josh.
But we're not getting to this for the point that I want to get to, which is just that...
What is the point you want to get?
Well, couldn't you do the exact same thing to Sorites paradox, right? Like you just say, we have a pile, and then you just start removing grains. And you say, well, it's only clear to me that it's a pile when it's at, like, let's say 1 million grains or like 500,000 grains. Like those are all very starkly clear to me. But then we start removing grains or distributing them, and then it becomes very unclear to me where the thing is. But I know that 1 grain is not a pile, and I know that 10 grains is not a pile.
Wait, but so sorry. If, just to be clear, Josh, but if you know, right? If you're not completely uncertain, then we're not going down that arm in the tree.
Right? This is what I'm saying.
And if you are completely certain and you do go down that arm, then you end up with the very position that you just agreed is ridiculous, saying I'm not sure if, for example, a human with a cow tail has value, right? It's just like either you have uncertainty. 1 second. Either you have uncertainty over the whole range, in which case I can give a reductio like that, or you don't, in which case we're not going down that arm of the tree. We're going... Do you disagree?
Yeah, because there's no clear definition, right? Well, it says here, do you know which traits defines this point? So that's to me asking, do you know the exact number of grains?
No, are you trying? So is the move you're trying to make to say that it's asking for a kind of like epistemicist position? Is that?
No, but at least it's asking for the thereabouts, right?
Yeah, it's asking for like a general area where you start saying, yeah, I'm uncertain if the being.
What he's trying to tell you, I think, right, is that even if you don't know the general area, which is to say, like, I don't know, like 20 beings that are like somewhere in the scale or something, right? There's like a range there. That doesn't like warrant the response that you don't know whether or not like a being at the very beginning is valuable or not, right? So that
what's being asked is just, do you have any idea where the value drops off, right? If you say it,
yeah, right.
I mean, I feel like we're kind of going in circles because like I'm not hearing anything that is like a criticism of this, right? It's asking, do you have any idea where the value drops off?
Yeah, but
if you have no, so 1 second, please. If you have no idea, the reductio is, yeah, okay, well, apparently you're uncertain of, for example, a human with a cow tail. If you do have an idea, then we're going down the other arm, as I've said multiple times.
Look, what I was trying to tell you, right, is just that, like, rhetorically speaking, it's just not warranted to pick out, like, for instance, the human with the cow tail, right? Because
sorry, Young, that is just flatly wrong. If they say that they have no idea, right? They don't know where there is and isn't value in the trait equalization process. You can pick any being in that process, and for that being, they're not sure if it has value or not. That's how you get to the cow tail.
Oh, but look, that would be saying that you don't know about any evaluation about any being. That's like totally a different statement. That's
that
value drops off, right?
But we're asking, do you have any idea where the value is lost, right? If you don't have any idea, you're saying for any frame in the trait equalization process, you're not sure.
I just don't take that. Well, whatever. I don't know if you're.
That's what's being asked.
Yeah, I understand what's being asked. I just don't. When you tell me where it drops off, it's telling me where like at the thereabouts of where the value is lost, right? Which is not to say that I'm giving like an evaluation about any of the beings that I actually do value, right? Which could be the human with the cow tail, for instance.
All right, wait, I'm not even tracking that. What it's trying to ask you is just, do you have any idea where in here we start seeing something that doesn't have value, right? If you don't, I mean, I guess it's just like, I don't know how to be any more clear. Like if this doesn't come through, there's nothing else I can say, right? Like it's asking you, do you have any idea where the value drops off? Do you have any idea once we reach a being that doesn't have value? Do you have any idea what beings in that process have value and don't, right? And if you just say, well, no, I don't, right? You have no idea. Then the reductio you get is you can just choose any being in that trait equalization process. And for that being, they're uncertain if it has value or not, which looks crazy because, for example, one of those beings is a human with a cow tail.
Right. And what I'm telling you is that what I get from that, and we can discuss it if you want, if you're whatever, but what I'm telling you is that from that question, I get, do you have an idea about only the beings that you start evaluating as unvaluable, not the ones that you actually do get as valuable?
Wait.
That's what implied by drop off, right?
I think there's just a confusion there. It's just like, here's the trait equalization process, and it's just asking you, okay, where in there do we start talking about something that doesn't have value? If you have absolutely no idea, if you don't know what beings have value and what don't, then I can again, it's just repetition.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's not the same question to me, right? Like from what you're saying, like the app question to me would be, do you have any answer, or do you have in mind whether or not you value or don't value any of these creatures, right, in the spectrum? That's like an answer that would warrant that absurdity claim with regard to the human with the cow tail, right?
Now, I can't tell if I have any issue with that phrasing, but I think you're just saying the same thing. Like, you're just asking, if we look at this process, do you know which of these have value and which don't?
Yeah, right.
Do you
No,
know?
yeah. Okay, I can I'm just saying that, like, in no possible scenario would I get that meaning out of your version of the question. That's just all I'm saying. Like, I cannot see myself interpreting that as what you just said or what I just said and you agreed to.
So wait, so you're talking about the question, do you know what?
No, you, when it drops off, that version.
Well, I mean, that was just me, like, stating it in language.
Yeah, right.
Like, what it says in there is just, do you know which traits define the point?
I'm just,
like, I don't. But the point is, like, once we're, I mean, okay, so if we want to get into a discussion about what kind of interpretation of that is most reasonable, and if there's a rephrasing that should happen to make it more clear, I'm open to that. I'm currently not persuaded of that. But the more important thing, it seems to me, is given that you understand what's being said there, you see how the reductio falls.
Yeah, right. No, okay. That's cool, right? And I agree with that. I'm just saying that the interpretation, like that, your phrasing of the question being interpreted the way that I later interpreted it by rephrasing it or by just, talking to you, right? A lot hinges on that, right? What hinges on that is which branch is taken, right? So that
generally, when I run the name of the trait and someone says they don't know, what I do right off the bat is I say, okay, well, when you say you don't know, are you saying you don't know at all?
Right.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So, but now that we're clear, now that we're clear about what's being said, we don't actually have any kind of disagreement here, do we?
If I were to say that I don't know if any being, even like the closest to a human, would be valuable, that would probably put off like most people. Like,
right. Okay. All right. So does that, like, Josh, do you feel like whatever your issue is has been cleared up, or is there still something that's like weird to you here?
Okay, so if we were just saying that, I mean, if the question is just that you don't know at all, like, what matters to you, then I know I don't have a problem. But so if we continue going down, if we just say that they're saying, if they say yes, and then you say which traits, right? And then they start saying, and they start saying things like a bunch of human traits, right? Like they start saying, well, like, these are all I clearly wouldn't eat these, and I clearly would eat these. Then it's just, I mean, you're just going to reach a point where if you make humans like animals, they're just going to agree that it's permissible to eat animals, right? Like, or to eat those human things, right? So it's just like saying something like, it's not changing I mean, you're not going to change I mean, it's just to say, like, well, I don't like that you eat meat. And they're like, well, I'm okay with eating meat. So it's not really.
Well, sorry, it's not just to say that someone doesn't like eating meat or something like this. It's like the whole idea with the tool is you kind of tease out how someone's making the value separation. Now, if someone is actually comfortable, if someone's actually comfortable with the way that they're making the separation, then so be it, right? There's still utility. You might be showing other people what their position says so that they see that it's not palatable. You might just be trying to see for yourself what their position says. But the idea here isn't that, anyone will become persuaded by this argument to become, or this dialogue process to become vegan, right? Like that's not the idea.
Wait, but okay, so let me just see what's the reductio? Like, you said you accept the reductio on trait X. Now, is that just to say that to someone that you value eating meat and I don't?
No. Because, so like say that. So for example, say that the trait they give is intelligence, right? They say, okay, the trait is intelligence. Then a reductio you could give is like, okay, well, would it be ethical to Holocaust the disabled? Now, if they say no, we got a contradiction, right? The trait is intelligence, and it's not the case that the trait is intelligence. And if they say yes, then they have a position that, again, to me, to people who have preferences like me, I would assume to quite a lot of people, including yourself and Young, probably everyone in this call, looks crazy.
But what I'm saying is, imagine they didn't say it was just intelligence, right? What if they say it's, well, I think that they have a reduced capacity for pain. I don't think that they're in my same social group. I don't think, and they go down a list of traits, because remember, they're like, it's plural in that instance, right? And it basically, in that trait equalization process, you're basically turning that person into a cow, whether or not there's some vague predicate about what exactly is a cow, you know. Then that person,
Sorry.
then that person is just going to say, yeah, you're just telling me that I'm okay with eating meat, which is something I already accept. Like, but that's, I mean,
the traits I heard you say there were what, being in my social group and less capacity for pain. Now, the second is an empirical claim, right? So there's actually like a discussion to be had there about, is that true? I don't currently know that to be true. And I don't know exactly what a social, like, you'd have to talk about how you define social group, but like, you know, are people in like Africa in my social group? And if they're not, like, would it be ethical to kill them? Like, this is the kind of stuff that we'd ask there, basically.
Yeah, but you're asking a bunch of stuff, but eventually it's not really going to get at anything other than either you've given a person, like, say a person is committed to eating meat, right? Then all you're going to be doing them is providing them with other ways in which they have to qualify their view to eating meat to you. You know, that, like, that's all you're.
I don't think I understand that. Like, I mean, Josh, the whole idea with the whole thing is just like, you're trying to understand how they're making the value separation, right? Maybe they're doing it in an inconsistent way and there's actually a contradiction, or maybe they're just doing it in a way that's going to look ridiculous to people. The idea of the dialogue flow tree is just to tease out how. Like, that's it. That's what it does.
But again, like, you admit that you could go through the dialogue tree and end up just on a bunch of properties that would turn humans into cows or humans into chickens or whatever other meat that they eat, right? Like, those could be all of the answers, right?
I don't really understand how you're saying that. Are you saying if the trait is every trait? Is that the kind of argument you're trying to run?
A series of traits, whatever we take.
Because it's just let me just finish there. Like, if you say the trait is every trait, then the reductios you get there are like, okay, so, you know, you have two cows that look physically identical. Apparently, one of them is ethical to kill and one isn't, because one is one molecule divergent from the other. Or have like a, sorry?
No, you're misunderstanding, right? What I'm saying is, like,
I thought you were trying the angle of trying to name the trait every trait.
That was what you're trying to explain. No. Look, okay. I'm trying to explain that whatever a cow is to a person, whatever a chicken is, let's just say that those are vague predicates, right? And it's not clear in anybody's mind when exactly we can say that a thing is a chicken, right? Like, if you did this, there's no essentialism about chickens. Or whatever, right? There's just a series of vague predicates, and then we say, okay, well, those things are over there are chickens, right? Those things over there are cows, whatever, right? So you have a bunch of vague predicates for those things, and a person might be committed to just saying that it's whenever, which I'm not sure exactly what makes a chicken. There's no, like, essential property or whatever. It might just be that what makes it permissible is whenever we transition from the vague predicate to human to the vague predicate of a chicken or the vague predicate of a cow, right? And so that's what I'm saying. So, you're just saying then, and if you say that, that's absurd. Like, if you say that's absurd.
I don't have clarity on what that would mean, right? What I would be doing if someone said it's the point where you transition from a human to an animal, right? I would just want to understand, like, what exactly does that require? And that's not to ask for some kind of, like, epistemicism. They don't have to give it, like, down to the molecule or something like that. But we want a rough idea, or else it's just not clear. Because if it's so vague that we just have no clue what is or isn't a chicken except for the first and last frame.
What I'm saying, right? Like, you can have a bunch of This is why I'm saying you're going to have a bunch of clear views about what a pile is up to a certain point, and then you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it's not a pile. And
right, so we want to know roughly where that point is, where the uncertain.
Right. And so once you get to that point, I'm saying, what if that were just at where cows generally are? Like, if you gave a person a series of images and you said, well, tell me whether or not that's a cow, they would say, that's a cow, that's a cow, that's not a cow, that's a cow, that's not a cow, right? And then they would say, well, where is it acceptable? And you just say, oh, well, all the things that I've called a cow, right? That's my mind. That's where the predicate is. I mean, it's like just saying.
Well, yeah. If they say that it's when it becomes a cow, but we don't, or when it's not a human, or how, like, I don't know, whatever framing you want there. The idea is just we have to have some idea where that is. And if they can't give us any idea where it is, then, I mean, I just don't.
Right, Josh. What, like, I don't know. I don't understand why you have to keep it vague. The point, like, I think I sort of see where you're getting at. Why, like, is it impeding on what you want to say to just say that they would pick, like, a being that is exactly like a cow, exactly like a conventional cow, but it doesn't have, say, like an ear or something?
They would say that's a cow without an ear.
Oh, okay, that's a cow.
There's a cow with less hair. Okay, there's a cow that is like standing on different legs or whatever, you know. But yeah, you just keep. Then at some point they're going to say, well, I don't think that's a cow. I don't know what that is, but it's not a cow. Is that thing morally acceptable to you? I don't know. We'll have to think about it, right? But I'm saying that in a lot of these cases, in whatever Isaac is saying, it just seems like the conclusion there is supposed to be it's absurd to eat meat, right? And I'm saying that because a person like who has considered these things can just look at what exists and say whether or not it's permissible for them to eat it, right? And all these hypotheticals, they could say, well, I don't know, maybe, you know, whatever, but they can ultimately look at what they're saying is permissible to eat, and then trying to do this like reduction down again. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they just say, well, I'll just look at the world and see if that's a type of thing. If I can eat it, maybe I can reflect on it a little bit and say, you know, well, if you were a human with a cow tail, I don't think you'd be permissible to eat. But if you sit on four legs and said moo and ate grass, then yeah, that would be, you know.
Yeah, I just don't understand what your point is. Right? I think let me look at.
Sorry, do you say you still understand, or you
don't? At this point, I don't look because
But you don't understand what my point is?
Yeah, last time I understood you was you trying to reference a point in the dialectic where the carnist or whatever the interlocutor is asked where this value dips off.
Yeah, we all seem clear on that.
Yeah, right, and that the interlocutor gives an answer that is generally close to where most people would consider a cow to be a cow. So let's say like a cow without 2 ears or something, right?
Uh-huh.
That's where I got stuck at. So what's like your thought from there on? Because I think you were like a bit unclear.
I'm just saying that this type of like, let's say you start changing things about a human. You say you give it a cow tail, but it was raised a human or whatever. They're going to say, no, it's not that, right? And then you say, well, if its diet is primarily grass, no, it's not that. Well, what if you give it 4 stomachs? No, maybe. I mean, no. What if you make it really stupid? Yeah, maybe. But not without all those other things first, right? Like if you made it really stupid first, then that might not be sufficient. But in this case, if you make it really stupid and it has 4 stomachs and it eats mostly grass and it has a cow tail, maybe that's okay to eat. I don't know, you know. But what I will say is okay to eat is like a cow. Like if you turn that thing into a cow, for sure, it's like maybe that's some weird case where the thing has 4 stomachs and maybe a reduced capacity of pain and it has a cow tail. It stands on all 4s, but it still looks kind of like a human. I don't know. Maybe I feel kind of weird about that. It looks kind of like me, but maybe it's like a chimpanzee, for example, or something.
All right, I get the concept. It's close, but not it.
Right. There might be questions there, but that to me doesn't seem like that would be like if some person came up to me and said, well, yeah, I would eat that thing, right? And I look at it and say, well, I wouldn't eat that thing. I don't think it's permissible to eat that thing. then what could I say to move it? Why is that really that absurd? It's not that absurd.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I think so, Josh. You're just asking what is really absurd about picking a being that is, not a cow exactly, but similar in most ways, like except a few. Let's say it's like a cow with like human skin or something, and like whatever.
Yeah, like
nipples.
the human skin. A person that eats meat is just going to say, yeah, it's just has fucking human skin, right? Who cares?
Right. And you're saying that if someone says that, then the absurd claim loses potency. Is that the idea?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, look, to me, I think people shouldn't eat meat, right? I'm a vegan. I don't think that anybody should eat meat. I think that animals suffer. That's all that really fucking matters to me, and they don't need to suffer. So that's all I care about, right? I don't care whether or not, if someone says, but it's not, to me, it's not absurd that people eat meat. I don't think it's absurd. It's like, it's totally normal, especially in the type of view, even though I think it's wrong, like vehemently wrong. So it doesn't align with my values. So maybe I guess in Isaac's use of the word absurd, I do think it's absurd. I just think it shouldn't be done, right?
Okay.
But
right, go ahead.
But it's not, what's not absurd to me is if someone says, like, say someone says intelligence, and you're like, well, what if it's a dumb human, Well, I don't think that's all right. Right, but what if it's like a dumb human with all of these other traits that I listed? And they might say, that seems to be approaching where I think it might be permissible to them,
All right. Okay. But I think I get the point, but just ask Isaac what he would do then. Right. Like Isaac, because I don't really remember the argument anymore because it's just been so long, but or the dialectic, I guess. But so if someone says it drops off at very close to the cow, like a cow with the human skin and human nipples, whatever.
I'd ask them what traits are actually being named. Like, what are they actually saying that point?
Well, what if I said it has hooves, four stomachs, walks on all the legs, has human skin, eats primarily.
If you're going to list a bunch, I got to write them. 1 second. So what are we saying? Hooves?
Yeah. It's dumb. It has below human intelligence, below retarded human intelligence, but it also has hooves.
Wait, below. Sorry, that's one that seems empirically weird. I think that the animals that we eat, you can find humans who are less intelligent than those animals, right? So saying below human retardation seems like not something you actually can say.
Yeah, I don't know why you're doing this though, Josh. Right? Ask Isaac, would you normally accept it if someone were to, if you were to ask for the traits, right? Why wouldn't it be acceptable for one to say all the traits that a cow typically has, except it has human skin, human nipples? Is that
sorry? Is the trait every trait of the cow except skin?
Yeah, replace the skin trait and the nipple trait. Those are human
skin and nipples. So one example would be of a reductio here. If we have a blindfolded disabled person in Auschwitz and we have a cow, right? You are uploaded this experience, okay, into your consciousness of the cow being, brutally murdered and the blindfolded person in Auschwitz. You can't tell which is human or not. You're not actually sure which of those is wrong and which is okay. It seems pretty crazy to be able to give someone the direct experience of a disabled person in Auschwitz and them not be able to say whether what they just experienced was wrong. I think that is reductive.
Wait, what does that have to do with the cow? I'm sorry, maybe I'm just...
So the idea there is that the experience they could have just had could just as easily have been the experience of a human, right? There's not actually, if you blindfold them, they can't see the body. There's not some definitive feature they can point to and go, oh, this was the cow experience, that's the human experience. So if you just put this epistemic barrier there of you have a blindfold on or something, they're not actually able to tell you if the experience that they were just, is just uploaded to them so they could have it of this disabled person being slaughtered in Auschwitz was wrong or not.
Yeah, so what is he saying? I don't understand at all what he's saying.
The reductio is to say that
let's say you had picked that human-skinned cow, whatever.
Yeah,
right?
the trait is every trait
what,
of the cow except for skin and nipples. That's what I heard.
Yeah, and the reductio that he's proposing, as far as I understood, is a situation in which there was that being, and which experienced Auschwitz, and then there's also a retarded person that experienced Auschwitz, right? If I were to upload into your brain the experiences of the cow so that you couldn't actually discern that it was the cows and not the disabled humans.
It's better to do it, it's better to do it with the disabled human. You upload their experience, but they're blindfolded while they're being slaughtered.
Okay, so they upload the pain or whatever, the experience of Auschwitz of the disabled humans, and you can't really discern whether or not it's the humans or the cows, right?
Well, and as a result of that, it can't.
And that's absurd.
I think. Do you not think that? I just want to ask you, Young. If you directly upload someone the experience of a disabled person blindfolded and being tortured in Auschwitz, and they say they're not certain if what they just experienced was wrong, does that not seem pretty insane to you?
Well, I guess, yeah, that would be absurd, but I think that sort of presupposes that the candidate for that pain would be a disabled human, right?
I don't understand exactly what you're saying.
Like for me to find it repulsive, I'd have to think that the being experiencing that pain could be something like a disabled human, right? For instance, if I were to experience that pain, and I thought that pain was experienced by like a bug, right? I'm not sure that, and I were to say I don't know if that's okay or not. I'm not sure that most people would consider that absurd.
The part that looks absurd is saying, I'm not sure if what I just experienced was wrong, when you were just given the experience of a disabled person being slaughtered.
But then in that situation, all you're doing is appealing to like whatever pain that is necessitated or experienced in killing.
All I'm appealing to is exactly what I just said, which is
right.
I think people. I mean, I certainly do, and I expect a lot of people have similar sentiments. Will find it ridiculous to say, if you give someone again the experience of a disabled person being slaughtered in Auschwitz, I'm not sure if what I just experienced was wrong or not. Right? I think that's going to look. It looks crazy to me. It seems like it looks crazy to you. I'd expect it looks crazy to most people.
Right, but
what does this have to do with
like, if I were to tell it, the point is that, like, I think that would move you insofar as, like, the experience that, the being that the experience is attached to is someone that I find, or someone or something that I find valuable. For instance, if you were to know later, right, that experience that was implanted into your brain was actually Adolf Hitler's, right, experience, and you were to say that you're not sure, right, that suddenly wouldn't be absurd.
But we're running the trait equalization process between an innocent human and an innocent animal. We're not running it between Hitler and a cow or something like that. So when we say like, look, here's the idea is just like, if you're given directly the experience of a disabled person being slaughtered in Auschwitz, it seems pretty obvious to me that I would be able to look at that experience and go, that was wrong. And I think that someone just like you agreed with, right? Someone being given that experience and then saying, yeah, I'm not sure if that was wrong. It just seems.
No, yeah, sure. I agree with that, right? But I'm not. What I'm not sure about, I don't understand is what about the disabled person's experience, or like my response to the disabled person's experience is supposed to give a verdict to the absurdity of my attitude towards like the cow, right? The cow with the human skin. What's that supposed to say?
I don't understand why there would be any kind of like further question. The idea is just that if you name the traits, every trait except for skin and nipples, right? I can say, okay, well, here's a disabled person being slaughtered in Auschwitz, right? And you're blindfolded. You can't tell what body you're in. You have to say, well, yeah, I'm not sure if that's wrong or not, because you don't know. It could very well just be that kind of being we're talking about, right? You haven't actually given some kind of answer that would allow us to still say you're sure that's wrong, right? Apparently, you need to be able to see the body. It's not enough for you to just have that experience of the disabled person being slaughtered to go, that was a wrong thing.
Yeah, right. I genuinely think that, though, right? That's why I brought up the Hitler thing, for instance. Although it's like a outside of the realm of conversation, the topic or whatever. But the point is that, like, if you experience like some immense pain by something that you don't know what that being is, and it turns out being a being that you either don't value or think is reprehensible and should be killed horribly, right? Then all of a sudden it's not going to come off as absurd to anyone, right?
I don't really even follow that.
No, it's like, look, the point is that I agree with you that if I were to be subjected to the pain of a disabled person at Auschwitz, and I were to say, look, I'm not really sure how to feel about this. I'm not sure if it's good or bad what's happening. That would be absurd, right? And I agree.
Yeah.
But that's in virtue of the fact that regardless of whether I know it or not, it is actually the disabled person, right? Because there's a million situations in which that pain, I think, like that pain happening would be good, or I would be ambivalent to it if it was.
But it's got to be a situation in the trade equalization process, though. It can't be like we can't start talking about some other foreign.
Yeah, and that in that case is the cow with the tits, right?
I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, I guess I just don't understand. It just seems to me like if we say that, sorry, we've gone around the block and I'm getting kind of hungry. When we say that, when we say that, what was it we were talking about? Oh yeah, the trait is every trait true of the animal, except nipples and skin. Right? I can take another being in the trade equalization process whose experience you wouldn't be able to discern from that being, right? And if I just put an epistemic barrier there so you can't tell what being we're actually talking about, then I can directly give you the experience of that disabled person and you're uncertain whether it's right or wrong, right? And to me, that looks pretty insane.
Right, but
so well, let me ask you one thing first. Is what you're saying just that you don't share that it doesn't
no.
look
insane? What I'm saying is more, I think, stronger than that, which is to say that I think most people, in the same way that you talk about absurdity, find it at least a lot less absurd, right, to be ambivalent towards a disabled person suffering than a cow with the tits.
Sorry, what? I didn't even understand that. It's less absurd.
Let me try to write it down so that I can sort of illustrate what I mean. All right, because we may be able to.
The last thing that you said, Young, was very clear to me. Right, like it seems obvious to me that it's going to be easier for most people to be ambivalent about the disabled person than it is for people to be ambivalent about the cow skin thing, right? That's what you just said, right?
Easier to be ambivalent about it. Yeah. Presumably, it's easier to be ambivalent about.
The other.
No. I thought that's what you said. Ambivalent is like. No, because like on the right, no, because they are certain about so they're not ambivalent at all about the cow.
It's the cow that they may be ambivalent.
No, well, I see. I have the I thought they don't have any mixed feelings about the cow. They have mixed feelings about the disabled person.
Well, I don't want you guys to feel that any of your questions are unaddressed, because I like you both. So like I do want to get off in a few minutes though. So is there any kind of stuff that like really you want to hit before?
No, I'll try to write this down if we're able to get to the bottom of it in time. Good, if not, whatever.
Well, I mean, we can also, you can just come by the server. We can.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think it's absurd in the sense that you mean absurd for people to eat meat?
From my.
Yeah.
No, of course.
But most people don't, right?
To eat to eat animals? I don't know. Like I don't think most people have thought about it. I think the percentage of people who find it absurd goes way up in the election though. And name the trade is like one way to get that.
Okay, but I mean, again, I feel like it's not even getting them. It's like you're getting them to think about hypotheticals about things that can have like that don't exist at all, right? Like four hooved human things with stomachs and a cow tail, but human skin and nipples, and like eats primarily grass or whatever, you know. Like it's and is also very stupid. Like if that creature, like put that creature in front of me, and I guess I don't, you know, maybe it's impermissible to eat it. I don't know. You know, like to me, it's just like, to me, if I was a person who had that position, that doesn't seem absurd to me. I mean, to me, it doesn't even really seem absurd to eat meat. You know, I just don't do it. I just think it's wrong.
I mean, I don't think that there's a difference between how we're using like wrong and absurd there. Probably like it's like clearly against your preferences.
Yeah, but I don't think that people are unreasonable for having different preferences.
Unreasonable as in like illogical. Like we're just talking about whether you share the preferences. We're just talking about how you evaluate the preference, or like the thing the preference is.
Well, let me just put it this way: like, say you don't like chocolate ice cream, somebody else likes chocolate ice cream. For you, it would be wrong to eat chocolate ice cream, but it's not wrong. It's to you, it's not wrong for them to eat chocolate ice cream, right? But they still have different preferences, right? They prefer to eat vanilla.
There are preferences that others can have that I would be appalled by, and there are preferences that others can have that I wouldn't be appalled by. And that line isn't just split along preferences that I share.
Right.
So like of the preferences other people have that I don't share, there are some that I would be appalled by, and there are, right, like I don't have a preference to do sewer work. I'm not appalled by someone's preference to do it. I also don't have a preference to, you know, murder someone, and I am appalled by, you know, that preference.
Right. I'm just saying that, to me, I mean, I think that some people shouldn't do some things, and maybe you think that too. And I definitely think that I shouldn't do certain things, right? But to me, it's like, I understand where they're coming from, right? I think in a lot of cases, eating meat or something or whatever, it's excusable, you know, even though I think that they shouldn't do it. And so,
well, I think I don't know if we disagree there. Like excusable, I mean, so I find it very understandable that people have the kind of preferences they have because they've been like indoctrinated into this like psychopathic attitude towards animals, right? I don't think that they're unreasonable for having been.
Right, but there, if a person has those ideas, again, if you think that that's understandable, then you can understand why they wouldn't be moved by your argument.
Well, not really. I don't see how you're getting there. Sorry, Young also just typed his thing up. 1 sec.
Right, this is
terrible. Is it more absurd to be approving or ambivalent of this pain when experienced by I don't understand why we're talking about. Is it more absurd?
Because it was just to facilitate what I was trying to say, which I guess like you did. I understood that you didn't catch or understand, or I wasn't being clear. That what I was saying is that sort of the absurdity of the answer hinges on whether on what being you actually think the pain is being inflicted upon. Sorry, my grammar is fucked up.
I don't know if I really understand that, but what seems absurd about it is, well, it's hard to always say what seems absurd about something, but it's like the idea that you'd be able to have, like, Bob, the disabled person's experience uploaded into your brain of being brutally murdered, and then go, yeah, I have no idea if what I just experienced was wrong or not. Like that looks pretty crazy to me. Are you, just to be clear, I just want to understand this. Are you disagreeing about whether that looks crazy?
No.
Okay.
About the human, but I'm saying that it hinges.
Avi, are you? Well, sorry. Continue what you're saying, but I also want to. Once you're done, I want to understand. Like, am I missing?
Yeah, I think here's Young, is what you're saying, that you're just trying to establish that whether it's absurd or not, part of it actually hinges on certain characteristics of the consciousness, whether it was the consciousness of the individual that's being transferred. So if the consciousness was Hitler's consciousness, for example, that it wouldn't be absurd that the consciousness of Hitler is going through that experience. If there's like certain vices about the consciousness, that it wouldn't be so absurd.
We don't want to talk about Hitler though, because Hitler's not.
Yeah. The reply would be easy. The reply would just be that those are the types of characteristics that wouldn't fit in the difference in those trait equalization process between the animal and.
Yeah, I'm just like
I don't understand what Avi said either.
I think Young understood what I said.
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically about consciousness, but I think he got basically, maybe he was using consciousness to just say like the subject. I'm just saying that whether or not it sounds absurd to me to be ambivalent towards this kind of pain, right? Actually, it depends on whether or not I know that the being subjected to it is something like a disabled human, or whether it is something like a cow with human tits, or whether it is even something worse, like the extreme example, like let's say Hitler, right? Like the point is that it strikes me as less and less absurd to be ambivalent towards that pain if you actually know that it's these different subjects being subjected to the pain. Like and by that I mean that if you ask me as a reductio to me saying that the value drops off on the cow with the human tits, I'm just not exactly sure what it's doing to say to ask me a question about the pain of a disabled human, right? If I don't know that it's a disabled human. It's like not doing much.
Because according to the traits that you've given, I can directly upload that experience into your mind, right? You feel your throat being slit and, bleeding out in like terrible pain and agony, and, like, I don't know, like whether it's like suffocating in like one of the gas chambers that we kill animals in, whatever exact, horror it might be, right? We directly upload the experience of that happening to a disabled person. And you don't know if what you just experienced is wrong.
Yeah,
I just don't like, if that does not look insane to you, then we just have like fundamentally different sort of like moral intuition.
But look, like it's like, I think it's obvious, right, that depending on the knowledge that you have about the subject being subjected to it, you'd have different responses. Like if it was a bug, right, you'd have a different response to it than if it was like a toddler, like your son, right?
I think there's a problem with bringing in a bug, because like, does a bug even like? I mean, bug sentience is a weird thing.
Let's say your son.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about things that are like in the trait equalization process.
Well, your son would be, right?
Well, I'm just picking, we're just starting from like just a given human, not some like evil moral villain or something like this, and a given animal. And the idea is just like, I mean, I guess I'm worried that I'm talking past you because it's like I'm just repeating the same thing. So I feel like I don't know if I'm just going to irritate you here, but like the whole idea is, sorry, the whole idea is just like, if you give those traits, right, you get this kind of shell position where you end up just saying like they just have value in virtue of their shell. So if I give you just what's going on inside the shell, right, even if it's this like horrible experience of like your disabled neighbor next door being like just brutally murdered, you're not sure if that's right or wrong, right? The experience of just, and there's no appealing to some fact like, oh, this being might not be innocent, they might be Hitler. That's not in the trait equalization process, right? You just know this. I'm glad. All you know is just like you just have the direct experience, right? So,
right. Like the point that I'm saying is that while it's not with any shell, like let's say the difference between, like the shell is not going to be like important when it comes to a difference of pain between a normal human and a human with a cow tail, right? I think it's important to consider, or at least it's right to acknowledge that it's like a common response to have, that the shell in the case of the difference between the disabled human and the cow with the human tits is gonna have like a significant impact on how you feel about the pain, right? So that really like, so that the only question that I really see is making sense to actually gauge how quote unquote absurd your position is to actually ask, if you just were to directly witness the pain of this human cow with the human tits, how would you feel about it? And then you just judge the absurdity.
But that's just changing the reductio, so the craziness of it doesn't come across, right? It's like
and that's because I don't think that the reductio is actually like a good reductio.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't find it absurd, then I guess we just have fundamentally different preferences. But I mean, anyone who's like me, which I would take to kind of, one second, which I would take to be probably quite a lot of people, if you just have the experience of a disabled person being brutally slaughtered, uploaded into your mind, I think most people are going to pretty easily be able to go, yeah, that's wrong. That's bad.
But that's not what I'm saying. But like, I didn't answer the reductio. I'm not talking about.
Can I just answer
the reductio?
Well, wait, sorry. Before I hear more from you guys, I want to talk to someone who I think is more likely understanding what I'm saying. So, like, Avi, what's your read of like what's happening right now?
I take it to be that Young is saying that, okay, well, the characteristics of the agent who's experiencing the suffering can change what most people would feel about or would think about the nature of their suffering. So, for example, if there were vices about the agent suffering, that it wouldn't be the case that they would so obviously think it would be horrible. I would just have a quick reply to that. I would say, like, I haven't seen any of those vices that would apply to the overwhelming majority of the animal context that we're talking about. They would just be tangential. So if you want to say it's Hitler, or if you want to say that it's any like horrible individual, when we're talking about the trait equalization process between the animals we eat and the humans, none of those traits, all of those traits that are mentioned would just be category errors, since they wouldn't be true of one but not true of the other.
But this whole thing.
I just want to, sorry, can I just, before you come back in, Josh, I just want to make sure that Avi and I are talking about the same thing here. So what you're saying is, when Jung tries to get out of the absurdity of that by saying, oh, it might turn out being Hitler, all he's doing is appealing to a trait that's actually not it's not even a property that shows up anywhere in the trait equalization process. So it's
to be clear, right? Like, I brought the Hitler example just to illustrate how the vessel, how the subject experiencing the pain matters, right? When it comes to evaluating the absurdity of the ambivalence to the pain.
Right. But the only properties of the subject that have been brought forward so far that would reasonably make most people not be absurd to be ambivalent of it so far are just category error properties, and by category error I just mean traits that wouldn't even appear in the trait equalization process. They wouldn't be true of one. Yeah.
But that's, I don't understand. I'm not invoking Hitler. I'm talking about the absurdity, the reductio. Sorry, I was about to say absurdio. The reductio, which is the disabled human and the cow with the human tits. Right. All I'm saying is that I think it's fair to acknowledge, or at least that's my view of the world, I guess, that most people would have a significantly different response, right?
Yeah, no, let's say there was this ox, for example, let's say there was like a really smart, intelligent ox, and that it for some reason just wanted to kill a whole bunch of people, and it started just goring a bunch of people, and it was just killing person after person, and it just killed a village. Would people have like a different reductio for that? Like, yeah, I mean, it would have a different characterization, yeah, maybe, but I just don't see, if we just take like a cow, the average cow we kill, the average chicken we kill, any of these animals we kill, I don't see any of those like vessel traits or like traits that are characteristic traits or vices that would come between those animals and or even the cow with the human nipples or whatever. I don't see any of those traits that are being brought that most people would be more comfortable biting the bullet would appear there. Is all I'm saying. Like if they would, I would say, okay, well, it's just not what we're talking about in the context of animal agriculture.
I want to clarify something, because I've been trying to say this for a long time. Like, I don't understand the whole uploading the experience thing, unless this is just supposed to be some sort of like trivial exercise. So is the idea with the uploading the experience is that the cow thing or whatever has this experience of being slaughtered, and if you gave that experience to a disabled person, that would be objectionable. Is that the idea? Because it's not clear to me what the idea is. Because it seems like if it's the case that you object to the experience that's occurring, you could give it to anything and you'd object to it, right? Like,
right. You're just the point is that by putting in the cap,
I could give it to a rock, right? And if it's objectionable, if it's an objectionable experience, then it wouldn't matter what I gave it to. I could give it to a rock and it would still be objectionable, right?
Right. Like the point of what I'm driving at is that the point of saying that you're experiencing this pain and you don't know who is experiencing it, right? All it's doing, as far as I can see, is gauging whether or not I have some principled stance against that kind of suffering, right? That's what is being done when you remove the subject, right? You're just saying, are you horrified by this kind of pain, right? Like it's just not talking about the kind of being that I just reported not to have value for me, right? A theoretic.
I don't know if Isaac is still around. Because I was kind of playing a video game. I wasn't.
Sorry. Sorry, I was doing dishes. I want to make some food, but
don't worry.
I didn't even catch all of that. But like, I'm just kind of at the same spot. Like, I just feel like I'm repeating myself. So I would literally just say what I said before.
Let me ask you a clarifying question, because I was saying while you were away, I didn't understand the whole uploading the experience thing or whatever. So I'm just trying to figure it out.
Look, I'll just say it one more time. But like, I like you guys. I don't want to get frustrated. Like, look, the idea. Come on, 1 second. Sorry, but just a second.
But if you answer, I'm not going to get clarity. I'm not going to get.
Well, maybe get clarity with Avi, because my patience is kind of wearing out. So, the idea is just that if I give you the experience of some disabled person being brutally murdered and you're not sure if what you just experienced is wrong, that looks insane to me. And I think it looks insane to a lot of people. And if you don't think it looks insane, then we just have fundamentally different moral attitudes. I've just said the same thing like so many times, so I don't really have anything else to say.
Yeah, right. And all I'm saying is that saying that kind of thing is saying that it's absurd to not have a principled stand